My guest today is Terry Garcia. Terry is a remarkable man who has spent his career at the intersection of public policy, law, exploration, conservation, and storytelling. He began in Washington working on international development and environmental policy. Later went to law school, became a partner in a major law firm, then went back to DC, became general counsel and deputy director of NOAA in the Clinton administration, and then went on to help shape the modern strategy of one of the most iconic institutions in the world, National Geographic. I first met Terry when he and I became partners in Uproar, a project working to build market-based means of funding nature and conservation. And I knew he'd be a great Zero to Proof guest because of his passion for supporting foundational work for our planet and our species, his humility, his impact, and the resulting network he has built over the years of like-minded, mission-driven people. What's fascinating about Terry is that he effectively became a kind of venture capitalist for science, nature, and conservation. While most institutions funded safer, incremental scientific and exploration work, Terry looked for obsessed people with unconventional ideas, the explorers who couldn't let go of a question, a theory, or a mission. Over 16 years at National Geographic, Terry oversaw the organization's global science exploration and conservation work, in addition to its productions and studios, helping fund and support and tell the stories of hundreds of explorers, scientists, filmmakers, conservationists, and researchers around the world. In this conversation, we talk about the mindset of explorers, why optimism is essential to leadership, and why Terry believes pessimism is actually irresponsible. We also get into some of the many incredible stories that Terry has, from Jane Goodall's earliest days before anyone knew her name, to discoveries that reshaped our understanding of human origins, to expeditions that helped create entire national parks in Africa. A big welcome to Terry Garcia. Let's walk through the life of Terry, if we can. The life you've navigated a super interesting, unique, and very compelling, path to where you are today. So, but yeah, kind of wind back and kind of life of Terry.
You said people that have like a portfolio when they retire. Actually, I think the portfolio began much earlier. That's how I view my my career path, because
Great.
there wasn't just one thing that I did. Yeah. I First of all, I my intention when I went to college, and I majored in international relations, went to the School of International Service, and thought at one point that I would join the Foreign Service at the State Department. For a variety of reasons, I didn't go in that direction. That this was as the Vietnam War was winding down, and being in the government at that time just didn't seem like the thing to do. But I did get involved with a number of non-governmental organizations focused on foreign policy. So it was at least consistent with or adjacent to the studies at the university, and focused on things like development assistance, foreign aid, military assistance, the threat of an ever increasing world population, and worked for a variety of organizations. One really weird one, and it was the one of the first, was an organization called the World Federalist, and
Ooh.
it
Sounds ominous.
yeah,
Yeah.
that could get you in trouble today. It was an organization that had actually been started originally by Eleanor Roosevelt. And it came out of that era when there was this optimism about the sort of the potential for the United Nations and of they called it world government. And that was that was the organization's early focus. By the time I got there, it was more of a traditional foreign policy organization that did both education as well as lobbying. And so I became a lobbyist on these issues here in Washington. Spent lots of time working with Congress, and that experience led to
I'm sure that experience, I'm sure just the pause, a lot of time working with Congress. You'll have to sort of talk more about. That's not something most people have experienced. And the talk a little bit about just the characteristics of that.
Well, okay. So first of all, it was a different time.
Yeah.
This was when people actually still talked to each other if they were Republicans and Democrats.
Yeah.
The city itself was different because of technology, because of a lot of things. The people in Congress tended to stay around more, and they socialized, and their kids went to the same schools. And there was just a different atmosphere. It was more collegial, but there were definite policy differences, and
Yeah.
one of them was, and it's still, you see it today, and it kind of played out with what Elon Musk did to the Agency for International Development with the support
Yeah.
of Trump and his minions. This notion that foreign assistance is just a giveaway, that we're wasting our national treasure on these other countries. It's better spent here. And so we had that debate then, and it was a debate that I was very much involved in, advocating for why the United States should have a development assistance program, why it was in our interest to help countries achieve a standard of living that would allow their citizens to flourish. And just as important as the military or defense budget, it was there was a humanitarian component to it, but there was also a national security component, that it was in our very clear interest to do these sorts of things. One of the earliest projects that I was involved in was what we referred to at the time as Rhodesian chrome, and it was one of the early attempts by the United Nations to use its authority and the tools that it had to effect change. And at the time, there was a country called Southern Rhodesia. It's now Zimbabwe.
Yeah.
And
I think it had become Rhodesia at that point, because Northern Rhodesia split off into Zambia, and then Smith in '65 declared
correct.
independence, and so there, yeah, yeah,
They called it the
yeah,
UDI, the Unilateral Declaration of
Declaration of
Independence.
Independence, yeah,
And it was viewed by most of the international community as illegitimate.
yeah,
But they had certain resources. In this case, one that was particularly valuable at the time, and that was chromium. And they exported chrome to various countries. It was important for defense and military purposes. Russia was a big consumer of it, and as was the United States. And we imported a lot of chrome from Rhodesia, and the UN had imposed sanctions. The U.S. had agreed to that, and there was an attempt in the Congress to repeal the sanctions. And so we got involved in the effort to keep those sanctions in place, and to hopefully eventually bring about change in the Rhodesian government. At some point, I concluded that if I was going to stay in this business, the business of lobbying and trying to influence policy, that I should probably do what everybody else in Washington did or had become, and that is become a lawyer. Um, didn't want it because I wanted to practice law, because that didn't particularly appeal to me, but it was more, you need the credential. You
Yeah.
need to have that in order to be successful and effective. And I went to law school, first at night. Oh, I should say that the uh, World Federalist transitioned to another organization called New Directions, which was formed by some people who had been involved in the World Federalist, but in the larger international relations community here in Washington. And the idea was that it was going to be a common cause type organization, a
Hmm.
zone focused on foreign policy, where Common Cause was this grassroots organization at the time, very unique, innovative notion that was using sort of citizen power to influence domestic policy. We wanted to do the same on foreign policy and had this really eclectic group of individuals who were on the board and in the leadership. Everyone from um, uh, Margaret Mead, the
Oh
federal
yeah. Wow.
who I got to hang around with, to Robert McNamara and LaDonna
Wow.
Harris.
That's a little different. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. LaDonna Harris, who most people don't know nowadays, but she was very involved in the American Indian movement.
Hmm.
So it was this really interesting collection of very talented individuals, but across the political spectrum. Um, who came together, thinking that there's an opportunity here to maybe harness the power of individuals to effect change, just as Common Cause had done at the time with domestic policy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so the other thing you talked about was people. So there's a theme that I've found is that people are attracted to a mission, whatever the mission for them might be, and people, the people that that they can learn from, be inspired from, that in some cases will mentor them, bet on them. And so you figured out pretty early, that was a very that was a very powerful group to be connected with.
It wasn't a conscious decision.
No.
I wasn't thinking about it in those terms. It was just,
Yeah.
these are really interesting people. Um, I, I- and I was very young, and so I, I mean, somehow or other, I thought that I belonged in the room with these people, which
They
was,
would have kicked you out if you. They would have people. Yeah, at some point, people recognize when you didn't need to be. You've been able to
I
be in
guess they
some
do,
really
but
interesting
I
rooms.
was thinking, this kid's
Yeah,
in this room with these people, very accomplished people, and
yeah,
what on earth are you doing there? But anyway, somehow or other, I survived all that, and
yeah,
um, the organization it did pretty well, but it had its timing was off. It missed the window, the moment in time that Common Cause had captured and
yeah,
road to success. When we uh, launched New Directions, it was just before the election that resulted in Jimmy Carter becoming president, and he just kind of uh, basically adopted the positions that we had, and so the reason for being was kind of, it just evaporated.
yeah,
That's too strong, but it took the wind out of our sails. We didn't have the foil of the Nixon administration or the
yeah.
Republicans to
To raise
carry
against.
the tide on,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
basically to raise public awareness and money. So it kind of limped along, and it's like I said, at a certain point, I decided I got to go to law school, get a credential so I can continue to play this game, and that was uh, probably one of the significant uh, maybe most significant decisions I made. There were several others along the way. Um, but I went to George Washington Law School in the beginning at night. And that was a really painful experience, I have to say. And by the end of the first year, I thought, okay, if I'm going to do this and put up with the pain of law school, I need to do this right and at least give it a chance. And so I quit and went full time. And at the end of the second year in law school, you typically have an opportunity to join they call them summer associates, a law firm where you get experience, you get to meet the legal community, and hopefully get a job perhaps. And I have to say I didn't take it all that seriously, and
Yeah.
during the interview season, I was wandering around the law school at GW, and they would post the interview schedule. And again, this is before digital media.
Yeah.
We got our information on the bulletin board at the law school of who was there, and you could sign up for interviews. And I was kind of perusing that, and I saw that there was a law firm from California, from Los Angeles, that was going to be there. Uh, I didn't know anything about them. I just knew they were in LA, and I'd
Yeah.
never been to LA. And I thought, well, okay, summer in Los Angeles sounds pretty nice.
That can work. Yeah.
Yeah, that might work for me.
Yeah.
And so I wound up signing up for the interview, and I wandered in still unprepared. It was not the smartest thing. But I walked into the interview room, and there were two people there, an older guy and a younger woman. The older fellow was the main partner in the law firm, which was unusual in and of itself that he was there.
Yeah.
Uh, and the woman was a senior associate, and they were interviewing law students. And I sat down, and the I began this conversation with them, and the senior lawyer was a guy named Chuck Manette. And it turned out I found through the interview, and I actually recognized the name. He was becoming the chairman of the Democratic National Committee, and was the head of a law firm in Los Angeles, a young law firm. And we just hit it off. I started talking about what I've been doing. We had a lot of things in common. And at the end of the interview, as unprepared as I was, he gave me an offer on the spot, which again was unusual. I went there
Off you
and
went.
had an amazing time and summer, and at the end of it, did receive an offer and joined that law firm when I got out of law school in the early 80s.
Yeah. That's a pretty big career change from Washington in Congress to LA,
It was
LA law
huge.
firm.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
a pretty
Yeah.
big adjustment, and it was a difficult one because
What was it that led you to, because that's it's a significant shift other than, yeah, I enjoyed LA for the summer, but the life choice of, because you look back and all these things are the determinants.
yeah,
What
yeah,
what
yeah,
was
yeah.
what was it?
So
Yeah.
I didn't actually make the decision to stay in LA or to go to LA. They were opening a Washington office, and I saw that
Oh,
as
okay.
an opportunity to stay in Washington, stay involved in government policy, because they did have a practice that was focused on various policy matters. It was an administrative law practice, they called it. And so I joined the Washington office. But about a year into it, the partners in LA decided that I needed to come out to LA to get reacquainted with the firm. They were concerned that the office in Washington was too small, that the culture was very different from Los Angeles, and they wanted to make sure that I was well adjusted. And so
Well,
I,
well adjusted. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
So I went out for supposedly for just a few weeks, maybe a month, and wound up staying, not returning.
yeah.
I didn't even I had to remotely have my apartment packed up and all my stuff sent to me out there, and so stayed in Los Angeles, and um, that was a bit of adjustment moving
Yeah.
from Washington to LA, East Coast, West Coast, heavily involved in government policy to being more of a corporate lawyer. The firm specialized in banking law, real estate, and entertainment. And I wound up in the financial institutions department, the banking department, which again, like law school, had its moments where it was
Yeah.
kind of interesting. Mergers and acquisitions could be interesting, but I was becoming frustrated with it
Yeah.
because I didn't feel like I was having an impact much
Right.
beyond the narrow business community that I was operating in, and was surrounded in a law firm also by people who were very engaged in politics. This was the premier Democratic law firm
Yeah.
in California, with a whole host of political operatives and some very very well known names. And so I decided that, well, just to keep my sanity, I'll become engaged in some of the opportunities that are available to me as a result of the firm, and wound up representing a number of political candidates. Was general counsel for the Gary Hart presidential campaign, and
Oh, good Lord.
yeah.
That, yeah. Let's see.
Well,
Oops.
I mean, it was the first run, and that first run almost
Yeah.
succeeded. Almost,
Yeah.
he almost got the nomination from Walter Mondale.
Yeah.
But also represented the California Democratic Party, and was sort of the expert on the delegate selection rules, interesting, or the presidential nominating convention. Um, and so I kept my hand in it that way, and was involved with,
Yeah.
I represented or helped some NGOs in California get set up, and um, also developed a specialty in campaign law, primarily on the political contribution side and what was and was not permissible. And so stayed engaged that way, and but still was practicing law. I became a partner. Left the large firms with a group of guys, started our own. Went to a white shoe New York firm to set up their banking practice. I did this for 14 years. So I was very much involved in the legal community out there and in the profession. And I had a growing practice in California, but was still not
Yeah.
seeing
There's
myself
something there, right? Yeah. There
building
was
it.
something nagging. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I knew what it was, and my wife knew what it was. My parents knew what it was. It was just feeling that, I wasn't contributing, that I was just representing various corporate interests. And, if I stayed, it would maybe be bigger deals, but basically the same thing year after year. Um, but uh, I also was making a really good living and was a
Yeah.
partner. And that's, if you're a lawyer, that's the golden ring. That's what everybody strives for. And it's the definition of success. Um, So I was at this New York firm, took my practice back to Manat, and got a call one day because several of the partners had already left. One of them was in presidential personnel, in fact, was head of it. And he had somebody reach out to me and they said, "Hey, we'd like to talk to you about a possible job in the administration." This is Bill Clinton uh, in 94. So I waited a year or so after the election, got a call, and they said, we've got this position at NOAA. We'd like to talk to you about you being general counsel of NOAA. And I had maybe a vague notion of what NOAA was.
Yeah, you might sort of describe that because I think
Yeah. So,
most people have less than a vague notice.
NOAA, when they said no, I'm going, what the
Yeah, yeah,
is NOAA? Is the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. And basically all I knew at the time was that they're kind of involved in weather and uh, ships, get the mate
yeah.
from them. And that was about it. But I read up on it. It looked like they did kind of interesting stuff. Went to Washington, had the interview with a number of different people. And NOAA, it turned out, did a range of things. Certainly, the Weather Service was one of them, but also climate research, ocean research, managing coastal resources. They were sort of the Department of Interior and EPA equivalent in the ocean and in coastal areas, and administered the Endangered Species Act. And I had the interview; it went well. I came back, although I wasn't sure about it, and I started, had a debrief with my wife, and I was thinking, well, I just moved back to the firm. I brought all these people. I have a responsibility to them, and we began kicking it around, and basically, she said, and I agreed that um, if I don't do it, I'll probably live to regret it.
That right there is something I've heard from a lot of people. Actually, Jeff Bezos said that. He said, when I look at big decisions, he goes, I will ask myself if when I turn 80, how will I feel? And you know, um, uh, my experience, is that people regret the things they didn't do a lot of times. For you could have picked, I'm making a lot of money, it's comfortable, but the mission called you.
Well, yeah, and I knew that if I stayed, I knew what I'd be doing. I knew what I'd be doing in 5 years and 10 years, and the thought of it was, almost too much to bear. And I also looked around. The lawyers are notorious for being unhappy, for being discontent and not really happy with their job. And I looked at a lot of people around me, and there were a lot of unhappy lawyers. They were making a ton of money, but there was this, people would commonly say they had golden handcuffs. They were just making too much money in order to leave and do something more interesting.
Yeah.
And um, I decided I wasn't going to be one of those people.
Take off the handcuffs. Take
Yeah,
off the handcuffs.
and fortunately, we didn't really know what we were getting into in terms of the change from a partner's
Yeah.
and salary to the salary you get as a government attorney and a government employee. It was pretty dramatic. Had we known, it might have there might have been a different outcome, but fortunately, it didn't. So.
Yeah.
Uh, and I have to say there was also an attraction to just moving into the unknown. I had no
Yeah.
idea what was gonna happen. Still didn't know a whole lot about, NOAA. And I came to DC. We made the decision to leave. A lot of clients were upset. Several of the investment bankers called and said, "Hey, don't do anything rash. We're going to come and talk to you. We're going to help you through this the crisis that you clearly are experiencing.
Yeah,
He
yeah.
said, fine, guys, you can do that, but I've made up my mind. I'm going.
I'm
So
going.
a
Yeah,
lot of people just couldn't, it didn't compute. It's like, what on earth is wrong with you? You're a partner. You're making
yeah,
a lot of money, and you're going to give all that up, and go into the government because you do have to give it up. I had to turn over all of my clients, had worked hard to build a practice. And if I came back to the law, I'd have to start over again. Uh,
yeah.
and there was no guarantee of success.
But you
But
talk about something that I think really you almost gloss over it, but the decision you made and the trade-offs are ones that many people don't do. But you were able to be aware enough to say, look, the path here, yeah, I might make a lot of money, but the path here is not a happy path. These are not, it's not like I'm looking around me and these are the, people who are filled with joy. And the awareness to say the money is not going to be the primary motivator.
yeah, yeah.
Which is, because a lot of people think, oh, once you make enough money, you can make these decisions and you'll have freedom, but it's not. It's not that. It's much more the thing you had to look at.
Well, yeah, and I later came to realize that I had something that some of the other people I was working with later in my life had. The scientists call it the restless gene, that certain people have that makes them more prone to take risk or at least try new things. Uh,
Yeah,
I'll tell you about that and exploration in a minute.
yeah,
But anyway, the decision was made. It came to Washington, and it also coincided with a similar move by a friend of mine who was also a partner at the firm, and he was moving over to a one of the transportation agencies as general counsel, and he had even less of a background, frankly, in the agency that he was going to, and I remember that every day, every other day or so, one of us would call the other and say, "Have you figured it out yet?" And for the first several weeks, the answer was no. And then, we'd exchange stories about what had happened to us. But, after a month or so, things clicked and you basically figure it out. And part of, uh, part of the being a lawyer and why it would actually was helpful, a good thing that I had become an attorney, was that lawyers have to pick up uh, pretty quickly uh, new skills and understand new industries on a pretty regular basis. You've got to become an expert or close to an instant expert on lots of different things, and you quickly discover that there's a book on everything.
yeah,
And in fact, I remember in our when I broke off with this small group of young lawyers to create our own firm, we'd get calls from clients, and they'd go, "Well, we've got this problem, blah 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 blah," and we'd be looking at each other in the room as we're talking to the client, and they'd go, "So you guys have experience in this, right?" We go, "Oh yeah, yeah, we have experience in this." After we go, okay, we don't know anything about this. But then we'd go, yeah, there's a book somewhere in the library on it. We'll figure it out. And
yeah.
was our attitude, okay, it's
There's
not
always a book.
it's not rocket
Yeah,
science, but we'll figure it out. And that actually served me pretty well.
that's a really important that's a really important theme for people is you whether you call it the restless gene in this case, but it's also the willingness to take a risk of I can go figure that out, which enables you to try a lot of things that you otherwise could never try,
Yeah,
which
right.
will be a theme for you later.
And it allows you
It-
to
yeah,
move when other people will stay put,
uh,
and will decide that they want to take the safe option and
yep,
not risk anything.
yep,
Uh, I didn't find that appealing.
no,
But the so I got into the government. I was general counsel. Shortly after that, I was nominated to be the assistant secretary for oceans and atmosphere and the deputy administrator of NOAA. So I became pretty quickly the number two person in the agency and ran um, all of the sort of politically charged components of NOAA, and was the chief proponent of the Endangered Species Act work that the organization was doing, and spent a lot of time um, getting lectured and occasionally beaten up on the Hill by various Senate and House committees over what NOAA was doing. NOAA, it turned out, was one of the most uh, uh, active regulatory agencies in
uh,
the government firmament in terms of the volume of regulations that it issued. And it had a number of very controversial positions or policy decisions that it had to make. And I was involved in all of those. And uh, many of them were very consequential. They
yeah,
dealt with endangered species, they dealt with air quality, water quality, and the kind of place that we want to leave to our children,
yeah,
decision that had to be made. And I loved it.
yeah,
Once I got there, never looked back. Had no interest in returning to the practice of law, even though I knew that at some point the day of reckoning would come when I'd have to make that decision because it was a political job, and you're there until the term of the president ends.
yeah,
But wrote it for all it was worth, and I had an incredible experience and worked with some really amazing people and have enormous respect for the employees of NOAA and of the other government agencies, whether at the time they were political or career. Quite extraordinary group of people who believe in what they're doing, who all of them have there's a certain idealism that you're doing it for a greater cause or a greater purpose than just advancing yourself,
yeah,
which I think, by the way, is an essential component for all leaders, that you have to believe that whatever the enterprise you're involved in is something that is more important than just your individual fortune or fame.
yeah. I think that's very important because when you look at satisfaction, and probably one of the things that was missing in the law firm is that sense of mission and purpose, and as you said, you're trading off financial returns for emotional, psychic meaning, the feeling that my life matters more than just for
Right.
me.
Right.
And a pretty big deal, which then led you to an even, I would say, another bigger version of that. Yeah.
But on that last point, the
Yeah.
one of the issues I got involved with was the California redwoods, and it was a particular stand of redwood trees that were in danger of being clear cut. And these trees are 2,000 years old. These trees were there when the Roman legions marched, and uh,
I grew up in California and the coast and coastal redwoods and hiking, and yeah,
right.
so
There was a
yeah.
place called Head. There was the Headwaters Forest, and it was in danger of being clear cut by this
Yeah.
kind of, Hollywood um, uh, villain,
Yeah.
raider type, who had acquired and was going to send all of the raw materials to Japan. Anyway, the federal government intervened, and I got involved in that, and I was leading the effort, and we were able to stop that effort. We purchased the land, and we set it
Oh,
so
wow.
in perpetuity. And it, one of the things that kept going through my mind is that someday I'm going to be able to take my kids there and show them what we accomplished, that we saved this place. And I couldn't have done that if I had stayed practicing law. So I might take your kid and go, hey, uh, I was
See that
responsible
merger?
for that
See,
merger.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Anyway, so that it was a great experience. Came to an end. I had to start looking around for what my next adventure would be. The classic move is that you go from government back into whatever you were doing,
yeah.
become a lawyer again, lobby the government, take up residence on K Street, and make a lot of money doing that. Uh, I considered that. I was recruited by several firms, and wasn't that enthusiastic about it. Unfortunately, was invited to dinner but with a colleague, a former colleague, also a lawyer from LA who had wound up in the administration and had left. Spent a little bit of time at the Discovery Channel and then wound up at National Geographic and was head of the um, uh, what they called National Geographic Ventures, which was the for-profit arm that had the television programming as part of its responsibility, as well as some other commercial activities. And told him what I was doing and what I'd probably wind up doing after government. He said, "Oh, don't do that." He said, "But look, we've got this position that just opened up. I think you should consider it and apply." And that's what I did. And it was to be the executive vice president of National Geographic with responsibility over essentially all of the nonprofit activities of National Geographic, all of the research, conservation, exploration, education programs, uh, as well as a number of other divisions. And I thought that sounds really interesting.
That sounds amazing. I mean,
Hey,
people. I
I don't
mean,
know anything about this either,
there you go.
but I figured NOAA out, and there's some of the stuff I was doing at NOAA maybe applied here, um, and got the job. Interviewed for it, and fortunately received an offer and left NOAA, joined National Geographic, which was this hybrid nonprofit commercial entity that had a number of media properties. I knew nothing about media at the time. So that was another learning curve that I had to deal with, and as well as understand a very different corporate culture and acquire a new set of skills. Um, but very quickly came to realize that uh, I had just won the job lottery. Uh,
Yeah.
there was nothing like this anywhere else on the planet, and I had somehow or other managed to get myself into this amazing place and into a position that was extraordinary, even within an extraordinary organization. To be overseeing the very large exploration enterprise of that organization, and to have an opportunity to work with a group of individuals that uh, still influence me today, and it made a huge impact on my outlook and certainly a lot of leadership skills that I've acquired, and that was the explorers, the people who really made the organization what it is today.
So if you pause for a moment, I think again, most people um, know, probably everybody knows the name National Geographic, but not necessarily, some of the things that it did and, does. I mean, there was the magazine, which was around for what, God, I don't know, 100 years. I mean, it's
Yeah,
probably longer at this
well
point.
over 100 years. It
Um,
was launched back in the like early 1900s,
early 1900s. Yeah.
1904.
And so National Geographic was, as you said, you won the job lottery. From an impact point of view, back to your point about the redwoods, this is an order of magnitude, more. When the science and exploration projects that you did, the media, you know, uh, is talk a little bit, but it's also the people. I mean, again, you talked about early on, the I forget what the common cause alternative for the international, what the name of that was, but the people you came in contact, and then,
Yeah,
you know, what this decision put you in touch with is some of the most inspiring people, you know, in the world
yeah,
doing,
anytime.
doing amazing things.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
yeah, and
When I got there, it was clear that it was a different kind of place, and was doing some really interesting stuff. And it had this very well established, growing research and exploration component to it, where the organization made grants to scientists around the world, was responsible for launching the careers of many of their scientists. In fact, virtually every major explorer or scientist of that era had at some point received a grant, probably a tiny little grant from National Geographic that launched them on their way. The Leakeys, the famous paleoanthropologist,
yes.
Jane Goodall, Jared Diamond received like a $3,000 grant early in his career, and that's what launched him on his path. So it was involved in all of these things. Um,
Almost
but
like a venture capital for exploration,
yeah, yeah,
in a
and
sense.
I,
Yeah.
I often called it that, venture capital for science. That we were seeding these ideas, some of which would work, some of which wouldn't. But if you hit it, you hit it big.
Yeah.
Man, you only needed a few successes to see the kind of impact that you would have. Uh, it had two very powerful things, two powerful assets. It had a media component with a reach through the magazine of some 9 to 10 million readers globally, and a television presence. It early on in my tenure there, we launched the National Geographic Channel, and then it had this science component that ranged across a half dozen, a dozen different discipline, everything from archaeology to conservation biology and paleontology, you name it. And I saw what began to dawn on me was that we have the ability to do more than just fun science. We have the ability to actually effect change and do it on a scale that very few organizations can even contemplate, and that is on a global scale, using the power of the organization's media assets and its science, combining them and communicating these results. And we began to see the potential, and there were several proof points along the way of where we were able to actually have an impact on policy in a significant way. the magazine was not yet in the digital age. And I remember the editor telling me that, oh, we're never going to publish digital photographs. We're just not going to do that.
And
About 2 years later,
why,
started
why,
publishing digital.
yeah,
Yeah.
why would you, the internet's going to be a fad. It's going to blow over. But, you talked about getting probably the coolest job in the world. And, the very first time I met you, I was like, you had, well, it's got to be, right up there with coolest jobs in the world, in terms of, if you care about impact and you care about mission, National Geographic, has, through its life, I mean, you talked about it, it's starting as a scientific journal, but, introduced people to culture and civilizations and animals, with the, I used to collect, I think a lot of people did, the old National Geographics. You could go to garage sales and find them from, the 20s and 30s. And it would be the first, I remember, whatever the first time they showed bare chested natives and how much of a, thing that must have been. But before people could travel and before you had television, the quality of National Geographic was, people's window to the world, and um, that legacy was, was amazing. And then that transitioned into eventually, the television network, and Nat Geo Productions, which, so you stepped in kind of not knowing all the magic that was that was that was in there. And talk about what that felt like a little bit, and then how you figured out where you wanted to go with it, because you were at Nat Geo for 16 years.
It's kind of like when I made the transition from, the law practice to NOAA, moving into an entirely new uh, uh, business, or in that case, discipline. And the same thing with National Geographic. And when I got there, yeah, I discovered that this is not just a magazine, and it's not just a television show. At the time, we had documentaries and television programming on various networks, NBC, Turner Broadcasting for a while. Um, but it was something more than that. There were all these other activities going on, and the mission component of National Geographic was really its reason for being, because the mission had never been to be a magazine publisher, and the mission was not to produce television shows. That was not the measure of success. The original mission was, in this kind of stilted 19th century language, to increase and diffuse geographic knowledge. What it really meant was that the organization would send people out into the world. They would observe and gather information, and then they would come back, and the organization would take that information and it would push it out to its members, to the world. And that's what it did for, well, and continues to still do that, but for its entire existence. And that mission evolved over time. And, I came into it uh, with a particular point of view, and that gradually changed, or I won't say changed, but sharpened. And that was, uh, I wasn't interested in just acquiring information and then pushing it out, but rather, how could we use that information? How could we use the assets of the organization to enlighten people so that there could be change? One of the persons that I dealt with early on, and I met her when I was at NOAA, was Sylvia Earle, the famous oceanographer. And Sylvia had this formula, this saying that she used to repeat often, which I very much subscribe to. And she said the first step in changing the world is knowing, and that with knowing comes caring, and with caring comes action. And I took that to heart, that the first obligation we have is to enlighten people, to give them the tools to find their way. But also, once you do that, to provide them a pathway for taking it forward, because people want to do more than just be enlightened. Once you tell them, for example, that there is a problem, that we're experiencing climate change or some other um, uh, uh, environmental issue, they want to know, well, what can I do? And so I felt the organization had an obligation to provide that information. We shouldn't just be putting shows on television or writing magazine articles about how bad things were. We should also be telling them that there is an opportunity to make it different, that there is a better future out there. And, you know, once I got there, we were sending hundreds of people out into the field, each year, anywhere from 300 to 400. And after several years of doing that, it occurred to me that all of these people had come through my office. All of them were in search of some particular truth, and all of them came back as committed conservationists, or at least virtually all of them, because what they had found out there was that things were beginning to slip away, and they wanted to do something about it. And it reached a point where a group of them, the sort of senior, most influential explorers, the people that really helped define the organization, people like Jane Goodall, um, finally came to us and said, okay, um, we're not interested in just documenting the demise of the planet. We're not interested in writing the obituary for the planet.
Yeah.
We don't. You are either, and we have an obligation to do more than that. And that caused a. It was a subtle shift, but a shift in the organization's outlook, that we weren't just going to be exploring the world. We were going to provide information to help inspire people to care about the planet, and became more focused on that. Not advocates in the sense that we were lobbying or taking particular policy positions, but advocating for sound science, and not doing the, on the one hand, this, on the other hand, that game that many journalists at the time played, where they felt they had to give equal time to both sides, even if one side was completely wrong. And so our
Well, that was
position.
the broadcast policy. I mean, in order to be
Yeah,
able to have a
yeah, it
broadcast
was.
license, you had
But
to do.
at a
But you
certain
guys weren't a
point,
broadcaster.
but at a certain point, it wasn't objective. It was misleading, because
Yeah.
you were implying that both points of view were equally legitimate or had equal weight,
Right.
and it's not true. Um, and so we began to shift, and we also saw several instances where uh, just sending someone out uh, exploring and then telling the story had an impact. That combining our science with a media platform resulted in something very powerful and very significant. That storytelling and exploration could actually change the world, and that became one of my mantras. And it in fact does. I mean, the aside from acquiring information and in scientific discoveries, exploration has the ability to inspire people. It has the ability to change how they view the world. whether you're actually doing the exploring or you're observing it. And I tell people that every time you go out into the field, every time you engage in the act of exploring, when you return, you're changed, at least a little bit. Each time you go out, you come back changed because you have a different perspective on the world. I was talking to a group a few months ago, and I had read this article that quoted a French writer, and it was back in the 50s, and he had written sort of an essay on mountain climbing. And at one point in the essay, he said, you can't stay at the summit forever. You have to come down. So what's the point? What's the point of climbing the mountain and reaching the summit? And his answer was that it's not to stay at the summit. It's because when you're there, you have a perspective that no one else has. You can see what the people below you can't see. And that shift in perspective stays with you after you come down and has an impact on how you live your life from that point forward, even after you've, hung up the crampons and the ice pick. You're still changed, and that change is still impacting how you interact with the world.
If you listen to astronauts, that's, that they say something very similar.
Yeah,
When you
yeah,
come back from orbit, when you come back from
you're
space,
changed. Right.
you're changed and your perspective changes. That's super interesting. I'm guessing it's true of exploration in general, not just the top of the mountain. It's
No,
when you
no. I
talk
mean,
to people. Yeah.
anytime you go
Anything.
out exploring, anytime you, I mean, and actually, anytime you travel, anytime you experience something new, and exploration, I define very broadly. It's any time you're pushing the boundaries of knowledge or accepted convention. Um, it inevitably results in a change, and that's part of the reason you do it. It's not so much what you're going to find; uh, it's how it's going to change you, how your perspective is going to be changed. What new things are you going to see and understand? Um,
Yeah.
and that was the fascination and attraction of being at National Geographic around these people, and they're trying to understand what motivates them, because it's not easy what these people do, and understanding the one of the things that I've worked on over the last few years was sort of the explorer mindset. What is it that makes these people different from others, and what what's required? What are the characteristics that are required to be successful in exploration, which probably translate in many respects to just life generally.
Life generally. Yeah. So talk about some of those. I mean, and you wrote a really impressive book, The Future of Exploration, which we'll link to. But talk a little bit about what you found, because as I listened to you, there's a lot of resonance for, I spent my life in around tech and media, and a lot of tech is that magic of exploration,
Yeah,
of exploring something new and building something new.
yeah.
So because it's, but tell me some of the things you found in common, and then some of the more interesting ones.
The things in common is the
Yeah,
characteristic. I mean, it's
that's what I meant. Yeah, the
what
characteristics. Yeah.
I've been exploring lately, and there are a few of them. There are actually six that I've identified, but that they don't guarantee success. But if you don't have them, you won't be successful.
Yeah.
And they're optimism, idealism, courage, of course, persistence, um, independence, or independent rather, independent-minded and resilient. And the most curious one, or surprising one, I guess, uh, is optimism. I I've never met an explorer who wasn't an optimist. Every single one of them uh, wake up in the morning and they go, "Today could be the day. Today could be the day that I find what it is I'm looking for or solve that problem." And one of my heroes was Ernest Shackleton and the story of the endurance. And he he placed optimism at really at the very top of the characteristics that he looked for in people. And he called optimism uh, true moral courage, because maintaining hope and optimism in a crisis requires a very deliberate and difficult choice that's required to survive. Pessimism is very easy, and the expeditions that fail oftentimes suffer from that when the team begins to the infighting, or they just lose hope, the
Faith. Yeah.
faith in the objective, faith in the mission. And I I mean, I tell people today, because they people are uh, often discouraged by what's going on, or they're overwhelmed by the challenges we face, and that um, part of what you have to do is you have to resist pessimism, because pessimism is irresponsible, and that everyone has the ability to do a little bit and contribute to the solution. So
Yeah.
that, I mean, that was one of
Well, I
one of
want to pause for a moment. You said a couple of really, I'm just listening to, just they hit me, is pessimism is irresponsible. That is very profound. Um, and because I think a lot of people, we're in a moment where, but I think these moments happen a lot. People, in one sense, we're at a unique moment in time. In another sense, humanity has been through many unique moments as a species. You, but but that that view of of optimism to some degree is the highest order quality. But your point is the difference between pessimism and optimism is optimists look for solutions. Optimists look to navigate, and your point about people who are explorers, and you identified an archetype that you could be inspired by and help, and help be around, that you didn't know going in, like you said, I'm a lawyer. It was like, and then, yeah, but that changed your life, and one of the things that being at Nat Geo let you do was, I found this getting when you're able to be in a steward role with influence at an organization with big impact, you can, it gives you the levers to do some things that you could never accomplish otherwise, so being in that role both changed you, but you were able to use that platform. And we talk sometimes about how people use platforms for good and otherwise, but you were able to use that platform, and grow what became the Explorer program and grow the science programs and make a difference that you wouldn't have had, you wouldn't have had anywhere else, and so it's and those, you're blessed to have those moments,
I
and some
consider
people,
myself to be very fortunate.
yeah, and
These things don't
and then
come
so,
along
but
that often.
no, I mean, it's one of the things that one learns in life, I've learned in life, is that when opportunities and serendipity comes your way, um, you have to seize those moments, because you don't pick the timing. and,
No, that's
and,
exactly right.
yeah. And yeah,
I mean, that was the decision to leave the practice of law. An
yeah,
opportunity came along, and I decided I was going to grab it. And the same thing when National Geographic came along. The safe thing would have been to take what I had learned in government and go back into the practice of law. but
Yeah.
really didn't want that. And I tell people, I tell young
Yeah.
people who ask me, "Oh, you know, what should I be thinking about? How should I
Yep.
pursue my career?" And the one thing I do tell them is that you need to constantly be on the lookout for opportunities, for new opportunities, and not let them pass you by, because you may live to regret it if you do. Um,
That's
and not be afraid
one of
of
the
change, because
yeah. I mean,
people people tend to get really comfortable and complacent, and uh, change is a good thing. Frankly, I think you get stale after a certain amount of time in any one
you
role.
do.
Um,
You do.
and
Yeah.
10 years is probably the average. I stayed at Geographic longer than that, but um, I think 10 to 15 years, it's time to move on, find some new opportunity, because you can have several careers in a lifetime, and why not take advantage of that?
As a matter of fact, you should seek to have multiple careers. The the safe path is not something you're probably going to look back at whatever your end of your life comes and you're reflective. Very few people are going to come along and say, I wish I regret the risks they took, because you only have so much time and opportunity.
That was also part of not being satisfied with just doing the safe thing,
Yeah.
the comfortable thing, because in the scientific grant world and the foundation world, with especially the large organizations, uh, they tend to be very cautious. They want a sure thing, and that I understand why they do. You never get criticized if you take that conservative approach and only bet on the sure things. Um, but I wasn't interested in that, and to its credit, the organization wasn't either, and it actually had a history of this that I was just able to build on, and that was, we needed to take chances, and the whole point of exploration is you don't do it because you know what the answer is. You do it because you don't know what the answer is, and you don't know what you're going to find, and what you think you may find turns out to be something entirely different once you're out there. And that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to find those people, the ones who just needed a little boost, a small amount of funding to get them out and pursue their objective, their goal, knowing that a large percentage might not achieve
Yeah.
that. They might come back empty-handed, but some percentage would come back with great discoveries, or it would result in the development of a future talent, a great scientist, a Jane Goodall type person.
Yeah. Well, so if you don't mind, it's why I find the term venture capital, for exploration in science, so relevant, because that venture capitalists do exactly what you said.
Yeah.
It's not, they don't make safe bets. The whole point is to not make
But they
safe
don't
bets.
make they don't make stupid ones either. I mean, you
Yeah.
have some failures, but it's very calculated.
It's
You're
risk taking. So can
looking
you give
for
some examples? If you don't say, let me,
you're looking for a certain, well, a part of it is you're looking at the person who's come to you and evaluating them, and
Mhm.
uh, seeing if they have the characteristics that you look for. And
Yeah.
when someone would come to me and you start talking to them and they're just absolutely obsessed with what their focus are, with their objective, you know that they are not going to stop until they solve the problem or until they find the treasure, as was occasionally the case in National Geographic. But that's the kind of person you want, because those are the ones that actually will effect change. Those are the ones that will come up with that solution that you're not expecting, because they just won't give up. They are so persistent. They are so dogged. They just keep at it and go after it again and again. No matter how many times they fail, they just keep going forward. So I always look for people like that, and was careful not to disregard crazy ideas. If somebody came in with an unconventional idea, I'd I'd give them a chance to make their case. And uh, oftentimes I'd say, okay, let's go
Let's
see.
go give it a shot. Yeah.
See
So
where you
that it's
find
so
the
many
rabbit
parallels.
holes.
Yeah. But some.
And it wasn't a lot, it didn't have to be a lot of money. You found out that these people, they're certainly not in it for the money. And they could make a tiny grant go a really long way. But anyway, that was the difference between what we were doing and what the big foundations were doing. If you're a scientist or if you were an explorer, and you went to, say, the National Science Foundation, which does great work, and is now grossly underfunded as a result of what this administration has done. But if you went to a big funding organization, they basically would say, yeah, okay, that's a good hypothesis, but they also want you to basically demonstrate that you could prove it before they'd give you the money. And like I said earlier, well, what's the point then? If I already know the answer, why should I be interested in that problem? Give me something that we don't know what the answer is. It's a credible hypothesis. Let's go out and test it and see what happens. And those are where the great discoveries are made. And saw that happen over and over again.
The parallels with venture capital investing are remarkable. It's, what you talked about, an explorer and that obsession with founders. Seed investing where you don't really know versus more classic investing. But so give me some example of the founders that you bet on and the things they did, because you told me some stories at different times. But I think a few of those iconic ones are worth sharing because they talk about the mission and the person.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, one of them is a paleoanthropologist. His name is Lee Berger, and I had I got to know Lee early on when I joined National Geographic, because he had several projects and had kind of become infamous for being the bad boy of paleoanthropology. And he the more established people in the discipline found him quite annoying, because he didn't he didn't play by the usual rules, and he was advocating certain things that went against the grain, such as sharing your results
Yeah,
immediately.
God bless him. Yeah.
Rather than holding on to it for years and years and years while you researched it. Um, and he had a few misfires over the years, and was criticized for that as well. But he kept coming back, and because he had those qualities that I had always looked for: the persistence, the optimist, this belief that it's just around the corner. We're going to find it. And he called me late one evening and said, "If you've ever had any faith in me, you have to have it now." And proceeded to tell me about a find that he believed was going to change his world, his discipline, and how we view uh, uh, our early ancestors. Uh, and of course, he was looking for money, which was uh, A lot of people called me.
Yeah.
And at the end of it, I said, okay, Lee, um, what the heck? Uh, let's go. I'm in for a penny, in for a pound. And gave him the money and put him out there. And long story short, what he ultimately discovered was the largest um, collection of ancient sort of our early ancestors' remains found anywhere at any time. These were creatures that were on the family tree. They weren't modern humans by any stretch, but he had done something that no one else had done. And had done it because he was just persistent. He just kept going back again and again and again, believing that he was right. That even though people said, no, you shouldn't be looking here, he had this notion that no, that's where it is. I'm gonna look up.
I'm going to go get it.
Yeah, and
he found it. Yeah.
And he found it. And the again, that's what constitutes success. But it also requires somebody to be willing to take a chance on you. Early on, one of the early stories, and I've thought about her a lot because she was Jane Goodall, and she died last October, and she was an explorer in residence, and I'd worked with her during my time at National Geographic. But early on, this back in the 50s, she was this young girl. She hadn't gone to college, didn't have a university degree, but she loved animals, and she wound up in Africa because of that love for animals. She had read Dr. Dolittle and inspired her to go to Africa. And she's in East Africa, and she met the famous
Leakey.
couple, Mary and Louis Leakey, the paleoanthropologists, who were doing work there. And about a year after she had met them, they invited her to join them on their annual dig at Olduvai Gorge. And it was typically a 3-month period. And it was during that 3-month period that Louis decided that Jane was the person to do something that no one else had ever done before. That he was proposing that she go and live among the wild chimpanzees and study their behavior. And the reason he wanted to do that is that he had a theory about chimpanzees and humans had a common ancestor some 6 million years ago, and that by observing the chimpanzees, we'd gain insights into early human behavior, how our ancient ancestors may have behaved. And so he called up National Geographic and said, I want you to fund her. I want you to give her a grant. And this was a person who had no background in this, had no university degree. She didn't have a PhD. But this guy Leakey decided that she had the talent and the ability to do what no one else had done, and he convinced National Geographic to go along with it. And that was again an example of somebody taking a chance because they had a feeling based upon their evaluation of the individual, and oftentimes that's what it is. After a while, you develop a sixth sense to be able to ferret these things out. And somebody comes to you, they tell you their story, and you go, okay, this is the type of person who'll actually do that. I had another instance where this guy came to, and again, it's evaluating the individual. He came to me, and he was a tenured professor at Scripps. His name is Enrique Sala. And, a tenured professor is like being a partner in a law firm. That's what every academic strives to achieve. And he came to me and he began telling me about what he was doing and how frustrated he was, saying that he knew that he'd just be either writing papers or evaluating papers by graduate students about what's going on with the ocean, about what's wrong with it. He said, "I already know what's wrong with it. We know what we need to do. It's no big secret." And he said, "I'm just tired of just observing things and writing about them. I want to make a difference, and I want to." Uh, Follow in the footsteps of this other explorer that he had read about, who had gone out and into the wild, who had made these observations, and then we had helped broadcast the results, and it had resulted in significant change. He said, "That's what I want to do. I'll resign my professorship if you'll let me come in and pursue this." And I listened to the guy, and all right, if he's willing to give up a tenured professorship at one of the most prestigious institutions in the world, then I'm willing to give him a shot at it and invest a little bit of money and time in seeing if this guy can pull it off, because he deserves it. And
And
sure enough,
these are
he
not,
did.
but I'm just a second. These are not large sums of money. I mean, when you talked about, how many, what's the, what are the kind of financial commitments? Because I think the amazing thing here is also the leverage from little money to huge impact. So, I mean, do you remember kind
Yeah,
of the
anywhere
range of,
from $10,000 to $50,000 or
like,
$100,000.
nothing?
We're not talking about
Yeah,
millions of dollars. We're talking
no,
about enough money to, buy a plane ticket and maybe pay a graduate student and be able to support yourself in the field. And
yeah,
they can support themselves on a remarkably small amount of money. I mean, these guys,
yeah.
they don't require a whole lot. Um, but you get a lot of bang for your buck.
You
And
get huge, huge, yeah.
yeah,
So,
and so so this
other
guy Enrique
is,
Sala gave him a little
yeah,
money, and he turned his idea into a major program that has had a significant impact on ocean conservation. All
yeah.
because
It's,
he showed up one day in my office.
so that kind of impact, I think you mentioned at one point he was at Michael Fay who came to you and said, "Hey, I, have this idea that, transecting Africa."
Yeah,
And
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Well, that
And
was his
so the,
inspiration. It was Mike Fay who came to us and said, "Hey, I want to do a scientific transect," and he was going to walk through the country of Gabon through its this heavily forested, densely forested area, and it was kind of a wacky idea, but we thought, well, this will be engaging, an engaging story, great television,
yeah.
and put him out there. But he had an objective, and yeah, okay, there was a scientific component to it. He was going to record everything he saw, but he wanted to use that to save a piece of that forest because it was being logged. And he walked for almost 2 years and encountered all sorts of obstacles and endured hardships and had every imaginable tropical disease and parasite
Yeah.
at one point in his journey. But he made it through the forest, reached the coast of Gabon, and came back with amazing stories, amazing images, and we put him out on the lecture circuit, did several stories about what he had found, and about a year into it, received a call from the government in Gabon saying that the president wanted to meet with Mike and with the photographer, a guy named Nick Nichols, one of the great photographers, wildlife photographers. And so he and Nick went to Gabon. We sent him there, and they laid out what they had seen. Mike explained it. Um, the president at one point actually said, I didn't realize that this was in my country. He was just so shocked.
Yeah.
And at the end of it, uh, Mike had hoped that they'd create it like a small national park as a result of what he had done and saved, that piece of this
Yeah.
gem of the continent. Um, they decided that they would set aside 10% of the entire land area uh, as a national park, or 11 national parks, as it turned out. And it was all because of one guy, all because of one
Amazing.
obsessed, uh, persistent, crazed, idealistic individual who made it happen. And that was one of the proof points for us, and that was the proof point for Enrique. So okay, I want to do the same thing that guy did, except to do it in the ocean.
And
But it's
that's
Yeah.
requires that kind of persistence.
Of-
That
and
they
it
just
requires somebody, that's on them. It required on you, this uh, interest in using your place, your position, the opportunity you had to basically give these people that chance. Um, and then at some point, because we're going to get back to at some point, things started to change at National Geographic, and you decided it was time for another career change.
Well, like a lot of organizations, media organizations, the landscape was changing pretty rapidly in the 2000s, and by the teens, early teens, it was uh, pretty dramatic. And uh, our main revenue source was media, and shifting from the magazine to the channel. And it was becoming pretty clear that a small channel, a small media company was going to have a really difficult time surviving in this environment. And our original business model for the channel had been a joint venture with Fox Entertainment. They helped us launch it. They got us full coverage in the U.S. because of their presence in the market. And a decision was made to expand that joint venture and to include all of the um various media properties into the joint venture, and essentially um, split the organization into uh, one part of this one of the organizations would be everything that I'd been involved in, the science and exploration and education or activities, and the other organization would be a pure media company. And there was, the talk about how we'd cooperate and continue to work together to advance the objectives of National Geographic. But it was pretty clear that uh, separating the organization into two parts was not going to result in the same kind of success that we had had in terms of at least impacting science and impacting policy. That the real power of the organization had always been this ability to combine media with science. The ability I had to go to the channel or go to the magazine and say, "Hey, we've invested in this person, we've invested in this project. You need to help us now communicate it." Um, you could do that under this new regime, but you didn't have the same ability to influence their decision. And frankly, the the then president of the society didn't indicate any interest in leaving, and so I decided that, well, if you're not going to go, then I'm going to go find something else to do, because I've done everything I can here, and I'm not interested in staying in what I felt would be a diminished organization or capacity, and made the decision to leave. And
Talk a little bit about, you've stayed involved with, media, you stayed involved in science, that's how we met, is looking to essentially use media as a storytelling platform for people doing, really powerful things. And so, what are you doing now, and how does that all fit?
well, I'm not playing golf. Um,
There's a theme here. If you're a mission driven person, yeah, if you're a mission driven person, you're probably, the mission has you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and so I'm continuing to seek out ways to advance that interest, that mission, because I do believe that um, I don't feel that using your show's title, I don't feel I have uh, anything to prove, but I do feel that I have an obligation to help change things if I have the opportunity or the ability,
Yeah.
and that's where I'm focused. So it's I'm continuing to work with various non-governmental organizations, conservation organizations, to help them develop their programs, especially around ocean conservation. Um, I've continued to keep my interest going in media, and I have from time to time pursued various projects, sort of unfinished business from National Geographic, looking for Nefertiti or the Amber Room, and have actually.
Little things like looking for Nefertiti or the Amber Room. Yeah, it's so what? Yeah, okay, I'm not going to let you get away from that. What's the Amber Room? What's the Amber Room? And then I want you to talk about the book that you recently put together around the future of Like Switch. But what's the Amber Room? Yeah.
The Amber Room is one of those unfinished pieces of business that I carried with me after leaving National Geographic, and it had begun with a relationship that had developed over several years at Geographic with a journalist in Berlin, who his primary focus was documenting the neo-Nazi movement in Germany, and in the course of his research, he came across evidence that pointed to uh, the location of the Amber Room, and the Amber Room was this um, uh, palatial room constructed by Frederick, the Emperor of Prussia. It was made entirely of amber and gold. And it was an extraordinary thing to see. It was considered the eighth wonder of the world. And he gifted it to Peter the Great to cement an alliance they had at the time against Sweden. And so it was dismantled and moved to Russia, installed in the Summer Palace outside of St. Petersburg, and it remained there for several hundred years. And then in the early 1940s, when the Nazis invaded Russia in Operation Barbarossa, they stole it. In fact, they stole everything that wasn't nailed down because it was a kleptocracy. But they took the Amber Room, dismantled it, took it back to Germany, to East Prussia, installed it in a castle there, and there it remained for the duration of the war. But towards the end of the war, Hitler gave an order to remove all of the stolen artwork, including the Amber Room, and uh, put it into safekeeping, because their idea was that they were going to use it to finance the emergence of a Fourth Reich at the appropriate time. And that was the last anybody saw of it. And for years, people have searched for it. The the Americans, the East Germans, the Russians, even the Mossad, all of them have searched and none of them have found it. And this guy thought that he knew the location. And he's got a pretty compelling case. It's circumstantial, but it's pretty solid and it's very, as I say, persuasive. Um, and so I'm convinced that I don't know if the Amber Room is there, but I'm convinced that the location that he's identified contains something. It contains some of the stolen artwork that the Nazis had removed from various countries and from stolen from families. And so I'm continuing to talk to him. It's buried deep in an abandoned mine in an isolated area of Germany, and one of these days we're gonna
One of these days, you're going to get in there.
see what's there.
Yes. So being respectful of your time, I wanted to do kind of two things. So you and I got involved in a venture, sort of to carry on some of what you described as the mission of National Geographic, is how do you use media in this case to raise money for people doing important conservation work. We're still trying to figure that one out. some number of years in, but the idea was the power of media in this case, trying to figure out short form, but that idea of small amounts of money can make a big impact on conservation. And then you recently talk a little bit about what you're doing around the future of exploration in that book, and then that's because that's you're doing something, and you've done something after National Geographic that I think is very important, and that is you're still mission driven. Rather than one single place, you're exploring different ways to construct this
Right.
phase of the life of Terry.
I'd been thinking about the book for a long time, including when I was at Geographic. But the book is called "The Future of Exploration," and um, what I wanted to do was to uh, basically examine. It's something we talked about a moment ago. What is it that motivates these people? Why do they do what they do?
Yeah.
Why do they keep doing it? And what is the future of exploration? What do they see as the future of exploration in their particular field? And went to many of the people that I had worked with over the years and put that question to them. Everyone from Jane Goodall to Sylvia Earle to Bob Ballard to Lee Berger, who I mentioned a moment ago, asking each one of them to, from their perspective, talk about, why are you doing what you do? What is it that keeps you going? And where do you see your particular discipline, your area of focus? Where do you see it going and developing in the future? And put together this book. One of the commitments that I made to everybody that I talked to was that I would take, and my co-author Chris Vernier, who's a great photographer, um, that we would take no profits from the book. That whatever profits were generated, and the book business is not a great business, so it's doubtful we're going to make a ton of money. But if to the extent we made any money, we would use it to support early career scientists and explorers, because that was something that I was still felt very strongly about. And, those are the people that need it the most. And those are the people that have the hardest time getting funding. And so that was the motivation. And I've been using it to go out and to talk to people about exploration, tell them, entertain them with these stories of field experiences that I've had and that some of these other people have had, but also to make the case for why it's so important, why these people need support, why people should care about it. that it's more than just engaging stories, but rather it's this is the future. These are the people who will be making the next great discoveries, and we need to find a way to support them because government isn't doing it. And the private sector has not been fully engaged in these issues.
That's so important. I mean, again, it's a version of the mission that you had at National Geographic, but looking, which was a not-for-profit when you were there, kind of a hybrid. But the thing you and I have talked about, many times, and that for me is also, an important guiding light is private sector, market-based mechanisms, whatever you call it. That's where, frankly, that's the opportunity. Especially, there's massive amounts of money get deployed into really important things, and it hasn't been in here.
What I've found lately is that there's an interest in making these kinds of investments, but there's a lack of knowledge or information on where you find them, and so providing a platform that could actually identify perhaps new innovative technologies or just investment opportunities that would have both a return for an investor, but also would contribute to the health of the environment is something that is worth pursuing, and is an opportunity that I'm looking into right now. And the other thing is that there is no one now who is doing what National Geographic used to do. So there's sort of a white space on the competitive landscape that is waiting to be filled. And that's one of the reasons I got involved with Uproar, and one of the reasons I continue to look at various opportunities where, we might be able to take advantage of that opening.
Well, good. Well, you and I are going to continue that conversation, and hopefully we can, use these different platforms to find fellow travelers, because, as you said, there's a white space, there's a need, and the amount of money that it takes to make a huge difference is relatively small compared to so many other things out there. Well, look, thank you so much for your time. It's always a pleasure. It's always engaging. You have a lot of great wisdom and insight to share. So thank you very much.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Zero to Prove. You can find more info about our mission and bio and backstories on our guests at zerotoprove.org. If you enjoyed Zero to Prove, please follow us or subscribe, give us a nice rating, and if you are so moved, please write a review. This helps us show more people what is possible when you decide to live life on your own terms. Until then, I'm Anthony Bay, and this has been another episode of Zero to Prove. Take care.